again, we're looking forward to just a great slate of sessions this morning. And to kick us off this morning, we are just delighted to have one of our longstanding partners, the Alabama Department of Agriculture and Industries, Mr. Rick Pate, who is current commissioner for the Department of Agriculture. We are so delighted that he is here and part of his staff. Don Wambers is here as well. Just to give you some background, we know him already. Many of you in the audience know him already, but give him to Mr. Pate grew up working on his family's cattle and poultry operation in Lowndes County, where he learned the value of hard work and perseverance. And because of his roots in agriculture, he studied horticulture and received his bachelor's degree in 1978 from Auburn University's College of Agriculture. Pate put his degree in determination to work and started Pate Landscape Company over 36 years ago. Even though Pate has spent most of his time operating Pate Landscape, he never let go of his love and connection to the farms in Lowndes County. He had a purebred Charolais herd of his own, but at the death of his father in 2012, he also took over the family cattle operation. Growing up on the farm, having a cattle operation, running a landscape business, and serving as the mayor of a small rural town has given Mr. Pate a unique perspective to bring to the office of Ag Commissioner. He is mindful by 2050, farmers will have to double food production to meet the needs of the world, and that it will take visionary leaders who understand that we have to work smarter, not just harder, to achieve these goals. Mr. Pate, we certainly thank you for your continued support and your partnership. Sir, we thank you for being here.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm honored that y'all included me, and glad it worked out that I could be here. And I think I've been part of this a little bit every year since I've been in office. I'm embarrassed to tell you, 2 years into this, I still don't have slides or PowerPoint there. My staff's gonna create me some PowerPoint slides at some point, I guess. I didn't come from a education sort of background over the last few years, and so they've taught me about staff meetings and other things that I need to have that I'm not used to. But anyway, so we'll just talk, and y'all interrupt me or ask me questions as you want. I do take it serious that I work for y'all. I work for citizens of the state of Alabama. I love what I do. I have appreciated this opportunity. Like Mr. Robinson said, I've been in business for 38 years. In fact, I'm pretty familiar with the campus there. I actually did the landscape and irrigation on the Kellogg Conference Center there in Tuskegee, and actually won some awards with that project. I hope it still looks good. It did at the time we did it, however many years ago that was. But I am from Lowndes County, so I certainly understand the challenges of the Black Belt. We have a decline in population every census. I was the mayor of the town of Lounsboro, which, we had a water system and all those challenges that you would expect in a small rural town. And while I was there, we were able to finance a new well with the USDA a loan, and then we actually got some money and helped us put into a new storage tank and expanded the water system down to some of the new developments along the river. But anyway, I think I understand the challenges of agriculture, certainly understand the challenges of the Black Belt. And so I guess there's so much I could talk to you about, but I'm gonna just keep it to 15 minutes. But I think the biggest thing, probably this sort of current, it was the CARES Act money that we got from the governor's office. Y'all remember, I think they got 1.9 billion, $1.8 billion. And so originally we didn't know if there'd be a role for agriculture in that and where it would sit in there, but we ended up got about, I guess, $500,000 for the department. We got some new incinerators and different things we needed, and because we got awful close in that sort of April, May window when we got, because everybody remembers the COVID getting into meat packers and processors. And then of course, then there was a backup in that whole cattle system, and stockyards closed for a week or two, and prices plummeted, and there was no beef. And so that was a hard thing for consumers to understand what was going on. How could there be no beef in the grocery stores, and the market had gone away to buy cattle? And but we got through that. But then we got some COVID in some of our own poultry processing, and got awful close to where we were going to have to depopulate some poultry houses, but we never did in Alabama. I'm proud of that. We kind of stood on that edge of that cliff two different times, and we're awful close to having to go in and depopulate some chickens that there wasn't any place for them to go, but we never did. And so our story is not the national story. We didn't, obviously, we don't have the dairy industry, didn't pour out milk. We did very little, no, like I said, no poultry were destroyed. To my knowledge, I don't think any vegetables were really turned under. And anyway, we were able to, we think, help. That kind of leads into our branding program, Sweet Grown Alabama. And so it was really a blessing. Sometimes you make good decisions and sometimes you're just lucky. I think Sweet Grown Alabama was a little of both. We knew, or I had sensed from campaigning around the state, that people really wanted to know about their food. People now talk about, the best I can say is just the vocabulary and the words they use, talking about their purchases of food in particular. It's kind of changed, and because we've all heard the non-GMO and organic and all that, but in particular when COVID hit and there were shortages in grocery stores, it seemed like there was a much more of a emphasis on trying to find local food. And so we stood that Sweet Grown Alabama branding program up that 6 months before. And so it kind of cut both ways with it, because people were able to sell almost everything they could grow. So some question whether they needed Sweet Grown Alabama, but certainly it provided a way for people to know if they were buying tomatoes or peaches, whether they were from Alabama or from, hopefully not from Mexico, or they possibly would have come in from California somewhere. So it seemed that and that wasn't just an Alabama phenomenon, that was all across the country. I've talked to ag commissioners in the Northeast, and particularly one in New Jersey, which sort of surprised me, and they had the same experience there. People from that part of the country were wanting to buy food as local as they could. So, but the CARES Act, we ended up we're able to give out about $17 or so million to Alabama farmers. I'll run through that real quick, even though it's a bunch of numbers, and that can kind of be boring. But what we did, we started out, there was a big emphasis on the meat processing. And so, processing in general, just to build Alabama's capacity. And so we ended up giving about $1.9 million we pretty much gave to almost every meat processor in the state that was willing to expand. Obviously, we were given sort of strings. There was lots of strings attached to this money. And so people say, well, that's an easy task to give away money. It's actually not, especially with strings that came from Treasury, and then the additional limitations that the governor's finance department put on us. But anyway, we were able we had to get the money spent by the end. We thought we did, of course, right up to the deadline, then they changed it. But anyway, we went into it thinking we had to spend the money by the end of 20. So we couldn't really spend money on brick and mortar, but we were able to, probably help 29 or so meat processors add capacity, whether that was in new cooling units or new saws or just improvement. A lot of those got between $40,000 and $50,000 a piece. But that was about $1.9 million. We gave about 270 to fruit and vegetable processors to try to expand their capabilities. We gave 185 to catfish processors. Now, some of these, like the catfish, they had to send in invoices, and that was really a PPE reimbursement. And that was true of a few others. The nursery folks that we helped were really had to submit, and the poultry processing the same way, submit invoices and show they had spent that money to protect the employees. But we ended up approving 350 applicants for cattle and gave 3,600,000 and some change out to cattlemen. We kind of piggybacked because we were in such a rush on the CFAP program that the federal government had done, and they paid a percentage of some formula. And so since time was of the essence, and we felt like the USDA had already approved these people, if they had received that CFAP payment, then we just allowed them to participate in our program. And then, so we gave about 3 million. No, that was it, 6 million, say 6.5 million on that supplemental CFAP. And that took in case a lot of our commodities, 50,000 to the nursery growers. The poultry program ended up having about 700 applicants, and we paid out about 3.5 million. And that's probably the first time poultry growers have ever participated in a program. I mean, they seemed the most surprised because, they obviously don't own the birds, and most of the time aid or would go to the people who own the animals. And but we actually had a formula where we calculated if they had longer downtime in between getting their next flock in, then we had a formula where it'd compensate them on their loss of for not having birds for that period of time. Then we actually sort of got to the end and said, well, we've got a little money left over. Who hadn't we touched? And so I knew in April, when the stockyards were shut down and prices plummeted, our stockyards had been hurt because obviously they were shut down a week or two. That's completely, and then prices were bad for a month or two. And so we went back and I think gave most of the stockyards got about a $50,000 check. And so that was $500,000. And then finally, we did, even though that we know they're big companies, but those poultry processing facilities that really invested back in their employees, we compensated them for some of their expenses on providing additional PPEs. And for those that might remember, when the COVID got so bad in our poultry processing, we realized, a lot of those people that work in those plants live together, they come to work together. And so it seemed like the companies were doing a pretty good job of protecting their employees while they were at work. And you could see a pattern of they get spikes after holidays and stuff. And so we were able to get Brian Hastings and emergency management people to give us, I don't remember, I'm gonna make this up, but hundreds of thousands of masks and gloves and cases of sanitizer. And we actually went around, I personally went to, I think 18 of our 19 poultry processing plants and gave the companies PPEs for the employees to take home. And so to try to protect them when they were away from work. And so anyway, that's all, gone well. I don't know, whatever I can, the hemp program, we continue to administer it. We've taken application now. I think that's closed for this coming year. It's kind of plateaued off. We've looking, it looks like we've got about 225 growers. We had more than that last year and less than that the first year. So, we're still waiting on that processing capacity to come in there. So there's good market for hemp and CBD oil. But we're busy here. After my first year, which seemed to be so involved with speaking and meeting people, this second year was dramatically different. Obviously, we all know because of COVID. We have um, uh, been fully functional as a state agency. I know other people that aren't back at work, or they're part-time, or they're teleworking. We all remember that early on, Homeland Security came out and declared that not just agriculture, but the whole food supply chain was critical infrastructure. And so that gave us a tremendous weapon or tool to use when we saw challenges to our food supply system. Because I tell people, everybody knew there was a farmer out there, and most people, everybody knew there was a grocery store. It's just all the different things that touch that food supply chain, and had tremendous support from the trucking association, and we started a weekly call with them to see what challenges they were having, and of course the processing, the warehousing. But it's a lot of things you don't think about. I remember when Jefferson County started to place some restrictions, in addition to what the state had. They were going to shut down pest control, and so we were able to talk to their lawyers and say, well, there's diseases out there worse than COVID. And if we let some of these diseases get in some of this food in these warehouses, COVID might be the least of our concerns. So that we were able to work through a lot of that. And to be honest, I tell people, I don't know what my perception now, 2 years later, was of the state. But like I said, we've been fully functional. Other than about 2 or 3 weeks, I let people telework. Then we've been, everybody's back at work. Of course, we have about 100 here in our building, but we operate about 7 labs, and they certainly couldn't stop. We provide the meat inspectors, and so obviously they had to be in those plants for them to kill. They can't kill without us there. But but the cooperation among state agencies, I guess I was impressed with. Us talking to the governor's people, us talking to Dr. Harris's people at Public Health, us talking to Brian Hastings at EMA's people. So they didn't necessarily understand agriculture, but they certainly listened to us. And after explaining things, I felt like we all worked together, and I think we got through it pretty good. I told people, and I'd get a call from reporters, sometimes 2 or 3 a day, sometimes 2 or 3 a week. But when there'd be a shortage in a grocery store, and I just tell people that, our food system's safe, and it's sustainable, and it's abundant. And we all know that people were probably overbuying roughly 40% of what their normal uses are. And so the system's not built for that kind of gyrations in it. I mean, we don't have a 40% extra truck sitting around, or 40% extra production to ramp up if people are going to overbuy. And but because of the way food was moving, it certainly was safe, and we were monitoring that. But I had to keep telling reporters, if you empty the grocery store tomorrow, I'll fill it back up next week. I'll fill it back up next month. I'll fill it back up next year. I mean, America certainly got her problems, but one thing we don't have is we're pretty much can feed ourselves. And where they run out of cotton swabs and have to wait on China to send them some more. I never felt like that was the case with us feeding the American people, or in particular in Alabama. So anyway, I'll kind of stop there, and if there are any questions, I'd love to answer them. But I mean, I feel like I work for y'all. Love to hear from you. The phone here on my desk is of course 334-240-7102. My cell number 334-544-9892. And if we can ever help you, we'd certainly be glad to have the opportunity to do that.
Thank you so much, Ms. Pate, Commissioner.